Al-Mawardi, known by his proper name as Ali ibn Muḥammad ibn Ḥabīb al-Basri, was an Islamic jurist, most remembered for his works on rulership in accordance with Islamic law and principles. Al-Mawardi, called by some the Machiavelli of the Islamic world, though I would disagree with this comparison, and I will explain later why, was born in Basra in Iraq in the year 972 AD. He would grow up and live during a time when the Abbasid Caliphate and the old order it represented was very weak and fading. The glory and the might of the Abbasids had been long gone, as the Caliphate had slowly ceded power to more local groups, and the proper Abbasid Caliphate was also, in a way, subjects to greater powers around them, to the extent that Iraq and Baghdad, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, was under informal occupation by the Buwayhids, a Persian dynasty which more or less ruled the area indirectly, and to whom the Abbasids answered to as vassals. Though the Buwayhids were initially Zaydi Shia, who later switched over to Twelver Shia Islam, regardless, the Buwayhids were known for supporting the Sunni Abbasid caliphs and being very tolerant of the Sunni population, who formed the majority population beneath them. Iran and Iraq were at this time majority Sunni and not Shia, as the case is today, as that conversion happened several centuries later during the Safavid Empire's days. The Buwayhids also needed their Sunni allies against the Ismaili Shia Fatimids, this large empire here, so tolerance of the Sunnis was necessary for the Buwayhids. Despite this tolerance of the Buwayhids, there was still a lot of tension due to the split in religious allegiance between the Shia Buwayhids and the Sunni Abbasids, and there was a clear subservience towards the Buwayhids and the Shia by the Sunni Abbasids and their subjects. Later, you also had the emergence of the Seljuk Turkic invasions during this time, descending down from Central Asia and conquering the Buwayhids, and eventually also the Abbasid Caliphate under them. Sure, the Seljuk Turks were Sunni Muslims, but they were also quite different from the Arabs and the Persians that lived in the Middle East. So also there cultural tensions arose due to other differences. And al-Mawardi lived in a very chaotic situation, which was very unstable, with extremely shifting conditions and political situations from year to year. And it is in this context that al-Mawardi would serve as the Abbasid chief judge following the Shafi'i school of Islamic jurisprudence, and he would serve as a diplomat on several missions around the realm and to the Buwayhids, and as a writer of theological and political works, until his death in 1058 in Baghdad. Al-Mawardi wrote a lot of books on Islamic jurisprudence and on rulership, but al-Mawardi's most famous work is his al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyya wal-Wilayat ad-Diniyya, the ordinances of government, or the rulership wisdoms, and the religious custodianship. You can translate this in various ways, but in any case, it is a work that deals with the rule of rulership of the Caliph and the rule of his subordinates and other members of governmental administration, and how they should rule and act in accordance with Islamic law and the rights and obligations contained therein. Surprisingly enough, al-Mawardi's work is not only Shafi'i jurisprudence, based upon, for example, only Shafi'i's Risala and other works in the Shafi'i tradition, but a mix of Shafi'i and Hanafi Islamic jurisprudence, as he references a lot of Hanafi thinkers as well, and uses a lot of Hanafi arguments in his book, demonstrating a broad knowledge, flexibility, and ability to think freely in regards to interpreting Islamic texts and rules regarding rulership. Though it could also be argued that his inclusion of so much Hanafi thinking into his book is also a result of working under the Abbasids, who tended to prefer the Hanafi school throughout much of their history. Free thinking, or simply an adaptation to the current conditions, al-Mawardi still thought broadly about politics in Islam and about the rules governing politics in Islam. creating a larger, coherent political religious system for Sunni Islam, because for al-Mawardi, the caliphate symbolized an entire political-religious system that regulates the lives of men in a Muslim community to the smallest detail. Hence the emphasis in the ordinances placed on the qualifications, power and duties pertinent to a given office of government. This approach to the matter would explain the working arrangement finally reached by the Buyids and the Abbasid caliphs, later followed also by the more efficient Seljuks, whereby the military held actual power while recognizing the caliph as the supreme head of a government and receiving from him, in turn, recognition of their mundane authority, as stated by This worldview of al-Mawardi, of a caliphate with a division of powers and responsibilities that is bound by divine law, is also underpinned by a lot of direct rulings upon Islamic law and Islamic practice, rulings that often lead to the limiting of the power of the caliph and other officials, and rules that apply to everything from taxation, booty in war, land usage and control, the appointment of various offices including the caliph, and so on. Especially the selection of the leadership is very important in al-Mawardi's work, as the local leaders of the religious communities must have a say in the election of a new caliph, according to al-Mawardi. The ulama, the learned people of the religion, are here in al-Mawardi's work representing the interests of local powers and communities over the central authority of the caliph. This could be interpreted as a later reflection of a fact that had developed earlier during the previous centuries, where the ulama, the religious scholars, had already codified much of the Sharia law into formalized judicial systems, and local leadership and communities had strengthened their independence in contrast to the central authority of the caliph, and thus codified a view where the caliph and his administration are not a type of absolutist monarchical rulership. Rather, it is a rulership that is highly restricted and monitored by the learned men of religion beneath it. Yet, it should be said, however, that in conjunction with the work of al-Ahkam, al-Sultaniyya and al-Mawardi's other works, al-Mawardi developed the doctrine of darura, a doctrine of necessity, where the ends justify the means, where the end is an ideal Islamic system of rulership. Probably he developed this doctrine as a result of the fact that he lived in a very chaotic time, where following strict rules was either not possible or reasonable to do. So al-Mawardi states these various rules, but he also states flexibility and adaptation to the situation, because the end justifies the means. And this is why he is sometimes compared to Machiavelli, Niccolò Machiavelli, and his work Il Principe, the Prince, as both argue for making exceptions for greater aims. Though unlike Machiavelli's Il Principe, the prince that is about keeping power as the sole focus, al-Mawardi had a much more idealistic goal, with an ideal Islamic state as the end, and any means to achieve that goal that was not counterproductive to that goal could be allowed, theoretically. But the end state and ideal state is still a state where rules are followed and where people act according to these rules, even if it at times is not possible to do so in practice. The ideal is still a rule-based, idealistic Islamic state, rather than just a ruler keeping power for himself, as in Machiavelli's work. Thus, I say that they are quite different in their thinking, though they are quite interesting to compare, and I might do that more in depth in a future video. I consider al-Mawardi and his al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyya, the ordinances of government, an essential read in order to understand Islamic ideals about rulership, as the work is still considered important in the canon of Arabic works in that genre, and was used by thinkers within the Muslim Brotherhood movement, such as Hasan al-Banna during the 20th century, and is thus a fundamental work to understand modern Islamism as well. And al-Mawardi, as a thinker, is also a clear example of the fact that Islamic ideals of rulership and as specified political ideology is not something modern, which certain people have claimed, but is something that has existed for a long time in Islamic history and been codified at various times, like in al-Mawardi's work. And this was al-Mawardi. I hope you liked this video. If you have any questions, please post them. Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities.
اشتركوا بالقناة من فضلكم.